Welcome to Mountain Strong. Today we have come back to the Glen Alps parking area. We have walked up Flattop Mountain, which just a few weeks back we shot the videos at Flattop Mountain, but if you remember I said that there are a couple of peaks just behind Flattop Mountain, affectionately named Peak 2 and Peak 3. Well, that's where we've come for today, and so we've descended down the backside of Flattop and ascended what is called Peak 2. And we're not quite at the top, but I thought this was a pretty good location to shoot our first video. When I started setting up the tripod, there was a beautiful scene. As I set up the tripod, some clouds came and blocked the scene. And then as I looked into the tripod for that last time to get in front of the camera, there was a beautiful scene again. So you're going to have some changing scenery behind me as the clouds are sweeping over. It's been a very rainy week, and so we're very blessed to have a pretty dry day today to be able to do our shooting. And so anyway, we're going to make the most of it and study together today Psalm number 87. Let's go ahead and read that now. On the holy mount stands the city he founded. The Lord loves the gates of Zion more than all the dwelling places of Jacob. Glorious things of you are spoken, O city of God. Among those who know me, I mention Rahab and Babylon. Behold, Philistia and Tyre with Cush. This one was born there, they say. And of Zion it shall be said, this one and that one were born in her, for the Most High himself will establish her. The Lord records as he registers the peoples, this one was born there. Singers and dancers alike say, all my springs are in you. You know, you have to make a great effort in studying the Old Testament to miss the significance of Jerusalem to the minds of the Jewish people. Throughout the Old Testament, you have references to the importance of Jerusalem. You have Psalms that we've studied so far and that we will continue to study in praise of Jerusalem. You have these people reflecting upon what a beautiful and wonderful place this is. In fact, as they're referencing it in these first three verses, the psalmist describes the fact that the Lord founded it, he loved it, he brought glory to it, and he did so because he dwelled in it. Let's not mistake the fact that in the ancient world, you know, Jerusalem was never counted as one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. There were more beautiful cities back then, but as far as the significance of Jerusalem as compared to all of those beautiful cities, the other cities might have more grand structures and more excellent fortifications, but there was no greater thing to the Jewish mind than the temple, and no greater being than God. And God is what made that temple so special, and that temple is what made the city of Jerusalem so special. And so as you're reflecting on the Old Testament significance of the city of Jerusalem, again realize that it is God who brings glory to it because he dwells in it. And so the psalmist begins in sort of this way of basking in the light of the glory of Jerusalem. He talks about how wonderful it is for God to dwell in it, but then he pauses for just a second, and he takes a very interesting path, a very interesting turn. Psalms are very much ahead of their time. We know from a New Testament point of view that there's prophecy in the Psalms, that there is a forward look toward the time when God was going to reorder the way that he dealt with men. And you definitely see that in this psalm. I don't know how Old Testament audiences would have read this psalm, but I know that in reading these words, you can't help but wonder if some of them might have been shocked when you see these mentions of, you know, Gentile nations that didn't know God at all. Rahab is a reference to Egypt. Sometimes Egypt is referred to in that way, and so you have Egypt, you have Babylon, you have Philistia, Tyre, and Cush, and that probably modern-day Ethiopia. And so both the Gentiles near, the Gentiles powerful in the case of Egypt and Babylon, and the Gentiles very far away are going to, in the case of Cush, which is like Ethiopia, all of the Gentile world essentially is going to, one, know God, which is very special, but then two, they are going to be born there. And you pause and you say, well, what does that refer to in the Old Testament? Well, we know very well from Acts chapter 2 that there were proselytes from, you know, some of these far-flung places that found their way into the Jewish family, but that language of being born there, you can't help but think of the New Testament, can't you? You think about Galatians chapter 4 and verse 26, and you think about Paul making reference to the fact that Jerusalem is the mother of us all. Why? Because we are born into Jerusalem. We are born into spiritual Zion, the church, the kingdom. We are born again to enter the kingdom, Jesus said in John 3:3-5. And so when you're reading this, it's just dripping with New Testament application and thought. The fact that God was creating an image in the Old Testament city of Jerusalem, an image of what He intended for the church to be. Because as beautiful as Jerusalem was to the Old Testament mind, there was always that distance between the average Jew and God. He dwelled in the temple. They did not. His presence was not accessible to them. But when we think about the church is Jerusalem. The church is Zion. It is this special place where God and man meet. And so as you're reflecting upon this psalm with me, you can't help but do what the singers are said to have done in verse number 7. It says that the singers and dancers alike say, all my springs are in you. And you might wonder, well, what's the imagery of that? You'll notice that other versions besides the English Standard Version typically translate that fountains. And I like that because it very easily translates into something we understand. You ever sang the children's song, I've got joy like a fountain? All of my joy, all of what springs forth in my life, all of what bubbles up in my life, all of that is in you, the singers say about Jerusalem. But we say that about the church, and we say that once again because the church is where God and man meet. And so as you're reflecting upon this psalm with me, realize that God was always intending to include us in His plan, and that there's just this beautiful picture in the Old Testament of what we have become. May God bless you today.